All right, coming up on today's San Francisco 49ers Report, a lot of Niners injury news to get to in the lead up to tomorrow's preseason opener against the Las Vegas Raiders. Also, why Trey Lance playing the entire first half tomorrow against Las Vegas is really important for his development. Speaking of that matchup, though, watch parties are back. Our coverage of the preseason starts tomorrow right here on the San Francisco 49ers Report, 3 o'clock Eastern, 12 o'clock Pacific, live play-by-play, audience interaction, Super Chat giveaways. We'll be taking down some beers and chopping it up with the faithful. That's why you subscribe to the show. Most importantly, though, turn on those notifications by hitting that bell icon. Therefore, when we do go live for our pregame show, you will be notified. Let's begin here on the Niners injury report with Ray McCloud. This news dropping the other day. I did a YouTube short on this to relay some of my thoughts, but didn't have an opportunity to really dive deep into what this injury means for one of the best return men in the National Football League. McCloud suffered a broken wrist during Tuesday's practice. He is expected to be out at least 2 months. He was diving for a long pass, came down on that wrist. He underwent surgery, and because of that, he's going to miss about that 8-week timeline. San Francisco's going to have to carry him on the 53-man roster initially so that he's eligible to return at some point this season. If they were to put him on PUP, put him on IR, then he wouldn't be able to come back this year in 2023. And obviously with this injury, he will be able to come back. One of the big looming questions that a lot of people now have, he's a great punt returner, very efficient kick returner. Who could fill in for Ray McCloud? You're looking at Deshaun Jamison, the UDFA out of Texas, who's been having a really good training camp at cornerback. He also has return experience at Texas. Ronnie Bell, the 7th-round pick out of Michigan. Really solid camp up to this point as a wide receiver. He, too, does have return experience. And Willie Snead, he's kind of on the outside looking in of this roster bubble right now throughout his entire NFL career. Yes, he's been a productive wide receiver, but also has had some success as a returner in the NFL as well. McCloud is one of the best returners in the league, as I said. So this is going to be a pretty big storyline going into the regular season because special teams are important. We saw 2 years ago how they really cost San Francisco. Last year they got better there, and because of that, they were able to win some ball games and not allow some of these matchups to slip away. And McCloud, not only is he that good returner with good speed, explosiveness, the opportunity to really identify a hole, pick up those important yards to flip the field, as we saw last year in his first season with the Niners, a quality gadget weapon on offense too, as that wide receiver 5 who you can utilize on bubble screens, end arounds, reverses, that type of player. So San Francisco right now is going to have him on that 53-man roster, but after 53-man roster cut-down day, they can actually put him on IR, and then at that point, he will have to miss at least 4 weeks. I think that's going to be the play with the regular season coming up here in just a couple of weeks. As for how McCloud fared last year, 2nd in the NFL in punt return yards, 10th in kick return yards. So that's how much San Francisco is going to miss Ray McCloud, a very good signing last year in free agency. Now let's segue to George Kittle here. He's been banged up a lot throughout his NFL career, especially since he signed that lofty contract extension about this point of the offseason, actually back in 2020. Don't get too concerned with this. He's dealing with an adductor strain. So too is Elijah Mitchell, but George Kittle expected to be out about a week. So now, with the 49ers tight ends here, Ross Dwelley and Charlie Warner are kind of on the hot seat here. They've been with this organization for a few years respectively. Braden Willis, the rookie out of Oklahoma, has been having a good camp. Last year, among all tight ends in college football, he led that position group in yards picked up after contact. He can also play special teams, has some H-back experience. He's trending upward. Cam Latu, on the other end, who was a 3rd-round pick out of Alabama, has been struggling a lot. There was a play in the first joint practice between the Raiders and the Niners where Trey Lance and a end-of-game type of drill, drove the Niners down the field. He was able to create separation, extend the play in an improvisational type of manner. On fourth down, he threw a pass into the end zone to Cam Latu. He dropped it, and that has been an ongoing problem for him at Alabama. Getaway speed, the 40-yard dash in the pre-draft process was a little bit slower, but on game tape looks a little bit quicker. It's going to be hard for San Francisco to cut him in year one because it's hard to justify dropping a rookie off the roster who you obviously like going into the draft process. But right now, it's Brain Willis who's been outplaying him. And if Latu and Willis were playing better, I would say that they would have the inside track at potentially unseating a Ross Dwelley and or Charlie Warner for a spot on the 53-man roster. As long as George Kittle is healthy for the season opener, San Francisco's going to be fine. He had 7 touchdowns in the last 4 weeks last year. Really had that good continuity working with Brock Purdy and figures to be a very important weapon for Purdy going into 2023 as well. As once again, Kittle kind of looked like the guy that we saw in 2019 when he had one of the best seasons for a tight end in recent memory. All-Pro, that's what landed him that big contract, and last year a second-team All-Pro behind Travis Kelce. That's pretty lofty praise right there. On the final front here on the Niners injury news, Dre Greenlaw pulling a hamstring during Thursday's practice against the Raiders. This, outside of Ray McCloud, as far as the severity there, somewhat concerning. Soft tissue injuries can linger, especially a hamstring. You think you're fine, you try to leg something out where you're trying to range sideline to sideline like Dre Greenlaw does at such an elite level, you pull that hamstring again, and then you're out for an extended period of time. And while the Niners have a great linebacking core, headlined by All-Pro Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw, who last year, thanks to 127 tackles, played at an All-Pro caliber level, they're somewhat thin after that. They addressed this position in the draft, looking ahead for the future. D. Winters, Jalen Graham, the rookies out of TCU and Purdue, they've had some pretty good camps. I like Marcelino McCrary-Ball as a guy who last year UDFA coming out of Indiana. The Niners as an organization do like players who have a defensive back background. They like the speed, athleticism to then translate those players into linebackers. That's what McCrary-Ball can do. But as far as high-end depth goes, somewhat concerning. And this week 1 game against Pittsburgh is going to be a very difficult one for the Niners. I think that Kenny Pickett can take a leap forward, and that roster is a good one, especially defensively. You have T.J. Watt going up against Colton McKivitz. George Pickens is going to be a handful for the secondary. And if you're without a guy like Dre Greenlaw against a Steelers offense that can throw it a little bit better than in years prior when Ben Roethlisberger was clearly washed, and they can run it with Najee Harris, you want to be full strength, or at least as full strength as possible if you're San Francisco. So with that, we're going to tee up this question here. How concerned are you about these Niners injuries here? Because we know about the injury history for San Francisco under Kyle Shanahan. Scale it for me from 1 to 100. And this is pretty wild, our chat stats portion of today's show. Since Kyle Shanahan was hired in 2017, the 49ers have been top 10 in injury rate every single season that he's been this team's head coach. They play a physical style. Sometimes they don't have as many day offs in the lead up to the regular season because he's trying to get them acclimated for the physical style in which he prefers, and because of that, a lot of injuries do happen. Injury bug kind of hitting San Francisco low-key at this moment of time. Kyle Shanahan, speaking of him, interview on KNBR on Friday night, did confirm what I had predicted last week, that it was going to be Trey Lance and not Sam Darnold who is going to start for San Francisco. And when you think about all the reports from Mike Silver, Mike Florio, them talking about the possibility of Trey Lance getting cut when San Francisco would have to eat all that money, I called cap. I said it wasn't going to happen. Why would the Niners cut Trey Lance if he's the quarterback who's getting first-team reps when Brock Purdy is resting and has gotten a lot more second-team reps than Sam Darnold? It never made sense, and this is another indication why. Trey Lance is going to start against the Raiders on Sunday. This is a great opportunity for him for a couple of reasons, and here they are. Trey Lance has started 21 combined games going back to 2019 at North Dakota State. He has thrown less than 500 passes in a live game setting going back to when he went to North Dakota State. He needs ample time and a lot of reps and a lot of snaps to work out the kinks. He just needs to see the field because he needs to develop all of the potential that he has. So here with this game against Las Vegas, expected to play the entire duration of that first half, he gets the necessary experience that he needs to become a better player. And with that, he can show off some of the mechanical changes that he made throughout this offseason, working with the renowned quarterback private coach, Jeff Christensen, who is the private throwing coach for Patrick Mahomes. Going into last year, Trey Lance's motion, a lot loopier, longer. It took him a longer time to get rid of the football, and maybe because of the finger injury, maybe because of the bad mechanics that he had gotten used to, the ball came out wobbly. Now he's throwing a tight spiral. He gets rid of it faster, and everything has been cleaned up, especially the lower body. And depending on how wide your frame is, how thin your frame is, if it's all out of whack, that can lead to you overthrowing guys, misfiring right or left, or throwing worm balls into the grass. So I want to see the mechanical changes that Trey Lance can show off, and do they translate to a game setting when the live bullets are flying? I also think he has an opportunity here to show the upside that he has to the San Francisco 49ers. I saw a clip the other day of Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch at the North Dakota State practice facility. What a time it was then, too, leading up to the draft when everybody was wearing masks and there was nobody really in attendance then. That was the lead up to the draft when the Niners moved up, mortgaged 3 picks to take Lance at number 3. At that moment, they clearly saw the upside that he had to be a potential franchise quarterback. He hasn't been able to show that. I think he's displayed it in very minimal moments, but now an entire first half against the Raiders in an actual game, he could show that upside to this coaching staff and his teammates. And then lastly, if San Francisco wants to increase his trade value and they want to dangle him out there as a trade candidate for a quarterback-needy team across the National Football League like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Their quarterback competition right now, Baker Mayfield, Kyle Trask, who was awful on Friday night. Atlanta Falcons, Desmond Ridder. A lot of teams with quarterback questions still at this point going into the season. If they want to take a chance on Lance, who if you exercise his 5th-year option, has 2 more years of team control after this year, then they could decide to trade for Lance if they look at a guy who just turned 22 years old, plays well against the Raiders at the league's most important position, who's somewhat affordable for the next couple of years. So if the Niners don't want him, and or if they want to increase his trade value and empty the playbook for him so that he has an opportunity to really show what he can do, maybe another team comes calling, and if he plays well, the value goes up, and in turn, San Francisco gets a pretty good asking price back. So far in camp up to this point, it's not like Brock Purdy has blown everybody away. Now, I do think that Purdy is still going to start week 1 against Pittsburgh, but if he struggles for the first month and Lance plays well, is still on this team, there will be rumblings of the fan base, the coaches, the players wanting to maybe switch and pivot from Purdy if he's struggling to Trey Lance if he shows in the preseason that he has a lot of upside and potential. Because in training camp so far, it's been death, taxes, and Brock Purdy throwing interceptions. Last year, he had several of them dropped. At Iowa State, one of his biggest downfalls, turning the football over, throwing picks, especially in critical moments. If you're pumped up for Sunday's preseason opener, I want you to type FLV because F the Raiders, San Francisco. Can't wait for our watch party. Hope to see you all there. It's going to be a blast.